My
My
name is
name is
Renata
Odelia
Martinez, and this is the
Mitchell.
story of
I'm
how I
30
learned that
years
sometimes the
old and I
people who
live in
gave you life are
Seattle,
the same
Washington.
ones who
For
try to
most of
erase
my
it.
life, I've known one truth that shaped everything. In my parents' eyes, I was never the chosen one. That title always belonged to my younger sister, Thyra. I'm sitting here now in a cold conference room in Portland, Oregon. The leather chair squeaks every time I shift my weight. Across from me, my father, Halver Mitchell, sits with his arms crossed. My mother, Lysandra, fidgets with her purse strap. My sister Thyra stares at her hands, and Samuel Brooks, my grandfather's estate attorney, is about to read a will that will tear what's left of this family completely apart. But to understand why we're here, why this moment feels like the culmination of 30 years of invisible wounds, I need to take you back. Back to when I first learned what it meant to be the daughter no one chose to see. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled, and please, stay with me until the end. Thyra is 3 years younger than me, and from the moment she could toddle across our living room floor in Portland, the entire world around me began shifting toward her. I still remember my 7th birthday like it was yesterday, even though it was 23 years ago. Mom brought home a small cake from the grocery store, nothing fancy, just vanilla with pink frosting. She lit exactly 7 candles, handed me a disposable camera, and told me to make a wish. No balloons, no music, no friends, just me, my parents, and that flickering light. I closed my eyes and wished for what every 7-year-old wants, to feel special. 3 years later, when Thyra turned 4, I watched from the kitchen window as a full party company transformed our backyard. There was a massive bounce house, a cotton candy machine, a face painting station, and a woman dressed as Princess Elsa singing birthday songs. Over 20 neighborhood kids ran around screaming with joy. Thyra wore a glittering princess dress. Mom had hired a photographer who followed her around with a professional camera, capturing every moment. I stood at the sink, washing dishes from the morning, and I asked the question that had been building in my chest for 3 years. Mom, why didn't I get birthdays like that? She was arranging cupcakes on a tower display. She didn't even look up. Because you're older now, Odelia. You don't need those things anymore. But I was 10. I was still a kid. I still dreamed of wearing a princess dress, of having friends cheer for me, of someone putting their hand on my shoulder and saying, "You're special." That's when I started to understand. In this house, there were different rules for different daughters. As we grew older, the pattern became clearer. Everything I had, I earned myself. Everything Thyra wanted, she simply received. I saved nearly a year's worth of allowance, $5 a week from odd jobs around the neighborhood, to buy a pair of rollerblades I'd been dreaming about. They were silver with purple wheels, and I'd circled them in the sporting goods catalog so many times the page was worn. The day I finally brought them home, I was so proud. I laced them up in the driveway, wobbling and laughing as I tried to stay upright. Thyra saw me through the window. Within 30 seconds, she was crying. By that evening, Halver had driven to the sporting goods store and bought her a pair that cost twice as much. Top of the line, all the features, plus a matching helmet and knee pads. When I protested, not because I didn't want her to have rollerblades, but because I'd worked so hard for mine and she'd gotten hers by crying, Mom knelt down and put her hands on my shoulders. "Odelia, you're the older sister. You should know how to give in. That's what being mature means." I was 12 years old, and in that moment, I learned that my feelings didn't matter as much as Thyra's tears. In middle school, I made the volleyball team. Not only that, I was elected team captain by my coaches, the only 7th grader to ever hold that position at Lincoln Middle School. I was so proud. For the first time, I felt seen, important. Our championship game was on a Friday night in November. The gym was packed. I kept looking up at the stands during warm-ups, scanning for my family. They never came. After the game, which we won, by the way, I called home from the school office. Mom answered. "Where were you guys?" "Oh, honey, Thyra wasn't feeling well. She had a stomach ache, so we had to stay home with her." I said, "Okay." I said I understood. I hung up the phone and walked to the bus stop alone, my medal heavy around my neck, feeling like it meant nothing if no one was there to see me earn it. Later that night, I checked Instagram. Thyra had posted a photo from the ice cream shop downtown, smiling with Mom and Halvor, Caption: Best family night ever! I didn't say anything. I just closed my phone and stared at my ceiling until I fell asleep. There were so many moments like that. Small moments that added up over time until they weren't small anymore. In 10th grade, I won second place in a statewide writing competition. My essay was about what home meant to different people. It was personal and raw, and when I found out I'd placed, I rushed home to tell my parents. Halvor was in the living room reading the paper. "That's good, Odelia, but don't let it go to your head." That was it. No hug. No, "I'm proud of you." Just a warning not to get too confident. That same week, Thyra drew a picture in her 7th grade art class, a crayon sketch of her dream house with a pool and a rainbow. Lysandra had it professionally framed and hung it in the center of our living room wall, right above the couch where everyone could see it. My award certificate stayed in my backpack until it crumpled and eventually got thrown away. I started to realize something painful. No matter what I achieved, it would always be treated as expected. But anything Thyra did, anything at all, was celebrated like a miracle. By the time I was in high school, I'd stopped trying to compete for their attention. I just wanted to be good enough that maybe, someday, they'd notice me without me having to beg for it. I joined the debate team, the school newspaper, and a STEM research program for gifted students. I took 5 AP classes. I volunteered at the Portland Public Library every weekend. I did everything I was told would make me successful, and I was good at it, really good. I got a perfect score on my AP calculus exam. Came home, told Halvor. "That's nice. Did you finish your chores? Your mom needs help with the dishes." 2 days later, Thyra got a C+ on a math test. Not even a B, a C+. Lysandra took her out to dinner at her favorite restaurant to celebrate her progress. I stood in the kitchen that night, holding a dish towel, listening to them laugh in the car as they drove away. I squeezed the towel so hard my knuckles turned white. It wasn't Thyra's fault. I knew that even then. She didn't ask to be treated like the sun while I was expected to be the moon. Useful, but only when the sun wasn't shining. But God, it hurt. The breaking point came when I was 17. It was late spring. Thyra had just gotten her driver's license, and Halvor surprised her with a used Subaru, a 2012 Outback in mint condition. He spent the whole weekend teaching her how to drive it, patiently explaining every button and feature. I'd learned to drive 6 months earlier using Aunt Patricia's car. She let me borrow it on weekends, and I practiced alone in empty parking lots after my shift at the cafe, teaching myself how to parallel park by watching YouTube videos on my cracked phone screen. The night Thyra got her car, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Why I wasn't worth the same effort, the same love. At 2 a.m., I got up. I walked down the hallway. Halvor's office light was still on. I knocked. "Come in." He was at his desk, going through paperwork. He looked up, surprised. "Odelia? It's late. You okay?" I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Dad, do you ever feel proud of me?" The question hung in the air. Halvor's face shifted, first surprise, then something that looked almost like discomfort. "What kind of question is that?" My voice cracked. "I just want to know, because I feel like no matter what I do, it's never enough. And Thyra doesn't have to do anything, and you're always so happy with her." Halvor set down his pen.
The people who gave you life
He
are the
rubbed his
same ones who
eyes.
try to erase it.
"Odelia,
Before we dive in, I want to know where you're
you don't
watching
need
from.
praise to
Have
know
you ever
you're
had to fight for
good.
your place?
You're smart. You're capable. You'll be fine." But that's not what I asked. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't love or pride. It was frustration. "You're being selfish right now. Do you know that? Thyra needs more attention because she's not like you. She's sensitive. She needs guidance. You've always been fine on your own. That's a good thing." "I don't want to be fine on my own. I want to be your daughter." Halvor stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You are my daughter. But part of being in a family is understanding that not everything is equal. Sometimes people need more, and sometimes people need less. You're strong, Odelia, so you get less. That's just how it is." I stood there, feeling something inside me crack. Not break, crack. like ice on a frozen lake starting to fracture. "Okay," I said quietly. "I understand." I turned and walked back to my room. I didn't cry. I just lay down and stared at the wall until the sun came up. I never asked that question again, but I did start listening at doors, and a week later, I heard Halvor talking to Lysandra in their bedroom. "She's getting more and more like my mother every day. Cold, calculated, always keeping score. Maybe we should try to—" "No, I won't raise another Dorothy. I won't let her turn into that." I pressed my back against the hallway wall, my breath shallow. So that was it. I reminded him of someone he hated, and Thyra reminded him of someone he loved, and I was being punished for being born with the wrong face, the wrong personality, the wrong everything. The final straw came in the spring of my senior year. I'd applied to Clarkford University, one of the most prestigious schools in Oregon, with an acceptance rate below 10%. I didn't tell anyone I'd applied. I didn't want to deal with the disappointment if I didn't get in. But I did get in. And not just that, I got a full academic scholarship, everything covered: tuition, room, board, even a yearly stipend for books and supplies. When the acceptance letter arrived in the mail, I ripped it open right there on the front porch. I read it 3 times to make sure it was real. Then I ran inside. Lysandra was in the kitchen, unloading groceries. Halvor was in the living room watching TV. Thyra was upstairs. "Mom! Mom! Look!" I handed her the letter, my hands shaking. She glanced at it, her eyes skimming the words. "Clarkford," she said slowly. "That's far." "It's 2 hours away, Mom. That's not—" "Are you sure you can handle the pressure? It's a very demanding school. You've always been so hard on yourself." I stared at her, waiting for the other part, the part where she smiled, the part where she said, "I'm proud of you." It didn't come. Instead, she folded the letter neatly and set it on the counter. "We'll talk about it later. I need to help Thyra pick out her prom dress this weekend." And then she walked away. I stood there in the kitchen, the afternoon light streaming through the window, illuminating the acceptance letter on the counter like it was evidence of a crime I'd committed. Halvor walked in a moment later, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "What's this?" He picked up the letter. "I got into Clarkford, full scholarship." He read it, nodded. "Congratulations. Just don't forget your responsibilities here. Your mom can't handle everything alone while you're off at school." He set the letter down and walked back to the living room. That was it. No hug, no celebration, no "we're proud of you." Just a reminder that even my success was somehow an inconvenience. I picked up the letter, folded it carefully, and walked upstairs to my room. I put it in my desk drawer, and I sat on my bed, staring at the wall. That's when I realized they were never going to see me. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I could cure cancer, win a Nobel Prize, save the world, and they'd still just nod and ask me to take out the trash. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly alone. 3 months later, I moved to Clarkford University. No one helped me pack. No one drove me to campus. I took a Greyhound bus with 2 suitcases and a backpack, watching Portland disappear in the rearview mirror. When I arrived, I saw other freshmen with their parents helping them move into dorms. Moms crying, dads taking photos, families laughing and hugging. I carried my suitcases up 3 flights of stairs by myself. That first night, I lay in my narrow dorm bed listening to my roommate FaceTime her family. She was telling them about her classes, her schedule, how much she already loved college. I rolled over and faced the wall. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was strong enough to do this alone. But God, I was tired of being strong. My freshman year was a blur of classes, studying, and work. I took 18 credits per semester. I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a campus cafe, one tutoring economics students. I joined the debate team and the school newspaper. I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to feel. That was the point. But my body started to break down before my mind did. I stopped sleeping. I'd lie awake until 4 or 5 a.m., my mind racing with endless lists. Assignments due, shifts to cover, bills to pay, emails to send. When I finally fell asleep, I'd wake up an hour later, heart pounding, feeling like I'd forgotten something crucial. I started having panic attacks. The first one happened in the library. I was studying for my macroeconomics midterm when suddenly I couldn't breathe. The room tilted, my vision blurred. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself, but it felt like the floor was falling away. I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall until it passed. I didn't tell anyone. I just added panic attack to the list of things I had to manage alone. Sophomore year, during a Finance 201 lecture, Professor Williams was explaining portfolio diversification. I was taking notes, writing down everything he said, when suddenly the words on the page started to blur. My chest tightened. My hands started shaking. I stood up, mumbling something about needing water. I made it 3 steps toward the door. Then everything went black. I woke up in the campus health center. A nurse was taking my blood pressure. Professor Williams was standing nearby, looking concerned. "You fainted," the nurse said gently. "How long has it been since you ate?" I tried to remember. Yesterday? The day before? "I don't know." They ran tests, called a doctor. The diagnosis came that afternoon: nervous breakdown caused by prolonged stress, malnutrition, and severe sleep deprivation. The university required me to see a counselor before I could return to classes. I called my parents from the health center, hands shaking as I dialed. Lysandra answered. "Hi, honey. What's up?" I had to go to the health center. I fainted in class. They said I had a nervous breakdown. Silence. "Oh, well, you've probably been pushing yourself too hard. You need to learn balance, Odelia. You can't just work all the time." "No. Are you okay?" "No. Do you need us to come get you?" "No. What can we do to help?" Just advice, like I was calling for a recipe recommendation. "Okay," I said. "I'll figure it out." "Good. Oh, Thyra's taking her SATs this weekend. I should go help her study. Take care of yourself, sweetie." She hung up. I sat there in the health center, holding the phone, and for the first time since I'd moved to college, I let myself cry. The counselor's name was Dr. Vivian Harper. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a calm voice that made me feel like I could finally stop pretending. Our first session, I sat on her couch and said nothing for 15 minutes. She didn't push, she just waited. Finally, she asked, "Odelia, do you feel like you're constantly straining just to be seen?" And that's when I broke. I cried for 20 minutes straight. I told her everything: the birthdays, the rollerblades, the scholarship letter, the phone call from the health center. When I finally stopped, she handed me a tissue and said something that changed my life. "What you experienced is called emotional neglect, and it's a real form of abuse. You're not being too sensitive. You're not being dramatic. You were a child who needed love and support, and you didn't get it. That's not your fault." No one had ever said that to me before. Over the next 6 months, Dr. Harper helped me understand that I'd spent my entire life trying to earn something that should have been freely given: my parents' love. She taught me about boundaries, about self-worth, about the difference between being strong and being abandoned. Slowly, painfully, I started to heal. But healing doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean the anger goes away. I was angry. For the first time in my life, I let myself feel it. And God, it burned. I graduated from Clarkford with honors at age 22. I received 3 job offers. I chose a financial consulting firm in Seattle, far enough from Portland that I wouldn't be expected to come home every weekend. My parents didn't attend my graduation. Lysandra said Thyra had a choir concert that weekend. I walked across that stage alone, accepted my diploma alone, celebrated alone, and for the first time, I didn't feel sad about it. I felt free. Over the next 8 years, I built a life that was entirely mine. I worked my way up from analyst to team leader to associate director. I bought a small apartment near Green Lake when I was 27, 900 square feet filled with light, plants, and silence. The day I got my keys, I stood in the doorway for 10 minutes, just breathing. This was mine. No one gave it to me. No one could take it away. I called Dorothy, my grandmother on Halver's side, to tell her, "I'm so proud of you, Odelia." she said, her voice warm. Your grandfather would be too. I realized then that those were the words I'd been waiting my whole life to hear from my parents. Good. I kept my distance from the family. I went home once a year for Thanksgiving, stayed for a few hours, and left before dessert. Conversations were surface level. How's work? Fine. How's Thyra? Great. She just started a new TikTok channel. I thought I'd moved on. I thought the distance had healed me. But then, on a cold morning in November, Aunt Patricia called. Odelia, honey. Her voice was shaking. Your grandfather passed away last night. Peacefully, in his sleep. The coffee cup slipped from my hand. It shattered on the kitchen floor, brown liquid spreading across the tile. Grandfather Franklin, the only person in my family who'd ever truly seen me. The funeral was quiet, somber, awkward. I stood in front of his photo, my hand resting on Dorothy's trembling fingers. Thyra stood next to our parents, looking polished. I couldn't tell if her red eyes were from grief or from something Lysandra had just told her. A week later, we were all invited to Samuel Brooks's office for the reading of the will. I went out of obligation. I didn't expect anything. But when Samuel opened that envelope and started reading, everything changed. All of my personal assets, including real estate, investment accounts, and savings, shall be equally divided among my 3 grandchildren, Odelia Mitchell, Thyra Mitchell, and Garrett Mitchell. The room went silent. The total value to be divided is approximately $1.5 million. Each recipient will receive $500,000. I felt the air leave the room, not because of the money, but because I knew in that moment that my parents would never let this go. And I was right. Samuel Brooks adjusted his reading glasses and continued. Furthermore, I declare that any individual who challenges this distribution or attempts to alter it through legal or personal coercion shall forfeit their share entirely. This provision is non-negotiable and will be enforced by my designated third-party executor should such challenge arise. He set down the document and looked around the room. This is Clause 7. Your grandfather added it 6 months before his passing. He was very specific about its inclusion. I watched my father's face. I'd learned to read Halvor's expressions over 30 years. The subtle shift of his jaw when he was angry but trying not to show it. The way his fingers tapped against his knee when he was calculating his next move. Right now, he was doing both. Dorothy spoke up from her chair at the end of the table, her voice steady despite her age. Franklin told me why he added that clause. He said, I know what might happen after I'm gone. I won't let them twist this into something it's not. Lysandra's head snapped toward Dorothy. What do you mean by that? I mean exactly what he said. Dorothy's gaze was unflinching. He knew there might be pressure to change things. He wanted to make sure his wishes were protected. Samuel cleared his throat. Mrs. Mitchell, your husband also left this for you. He handed Dorothy a sealed envelope. He instructed me to give it to you if anyone contests the will. The envelope sat on the table like a small bomb. Halvor stood up abruptly. I think we're done here. Actually, Samuel said calmly, there are a few more administrative details we need to. We're done. Halvor walked to the door. Lysandra scrambled to follow him, grabbing her purse. Thyra looked between our parents and me, confusion written all over her face. She stood slowly, mouthed, I'm sorry, to me, and left. I sat there in the conference room, Dorothy's hand still in mine, and I knew with absolute certainty, this was just the beginning. That evening, I was in my apartment in Seattle, trying to process everything. $500,000. I kept saying the number out loud, trying to make it feel real. It wasn't the money itself that stunned me. It was what it represented. Grandfather Franklin had seen me, had valued me, had made sure I was taken care of equally, despite everything my parents had done to make me invisible. My phone buzzed, a text from Lysandra. Are you free? Your father and I would like to stop by and talk. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what this was about. I'm in Seattle. It's a 2-hour drive. We're already here. We'll be at your door in 15 minutes. I set down my phone and stared at it. They'd driven up without asking, without confirming I'd be home, because they assumed I'd be available. Because they always assumed that. I had exactly enough time to make tea I didn't want before the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Halvor walked in first without waiting for an invitation. Lysandra followed, her smile tight and forced. "Your place is lovely," she said, looking around. "Very minimalist." I didn't respond. I poured tea into 3 cups with hands that shook slightly, and we sat in my small living room. The living room I'd furnished myself, in the apartment I'd bought myself, in the life I'd built without any help from them. The silence stretched. I wasn't going to make this easier by speaking first. Finally, Halvor set down his cup. He didn't look at me. "Odelia, your mother and I have been talking. We think it would be fairer if you gave your share of the inheritance to Thyra." I'd known it was coming, but hearing it out loud still felt like a slap. "Fairer," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "She's struggling," Lysandra jumped in, her voice taking on that pleading tone I remembered from childhood. "She's only working part-time at that bakery in Portland. She just broke up with her boyfriend. She doesn't have savings like you do, or a career, or a college degree?" I asked quietly. "Because I paid for that myself. Or this apartment, because I bought this myself. Or the stability you're talking about, because I built that myself." "Odelia." Halvor's voice had that warning tone. "Don't be difficult." "I'm not being difficult. I'm stating facts." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Your grandfather's money was meant to help family. Thyra is family. She needs help. He gestured around my apartment. "You're doing fine. You have a good job, a nice place, a car. What do you need it for?" The question hung in the air like smoke. What did I need it for? The question beneath the question was clear. What right did I have to keep something when Thyra wanted it? "Grandfather left it to me," I said slowly, carefully. "He made that choice. Not me, not you. Him." Lysandra's face crumpled. "If he really understood Thyra's situation, I'm sure he would have wanted you to share. He loved you both equally." "Did he?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Because that's funny. Because my whole life you've made it very clear that you don't love us equally. So why would you expect me to believe Grandfather did?" "Odelia Marie Mitchell." Halvor stood up. His voice was cold, controlled, dangerous. "Do you not remember who raised you, who fed you, who paid for your braces, your school supplies, drove you to volleyball practice, made sure you had a roof over your head?" There it was, the debt, the invisible ledger they'd been keeping my entire life. "I remember," I said quietly, standing to face him. "I also remember who worked from age 16 to pay for anything you deemed extra, who took out credit card debt to buy a laptop for college because Thyra needed the family computer for her homework, who came home for Thanksgiving every year and left feeling more alone than before I arrived." "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest." My voice rose despite myself. "And you can't stand it because you're finally being asked to see what you've spent 30 years ignoring." Halvor's jaw clenched. When he spoke, his voice was ice. "If you keep that money, don't expect to ever set foot in our house again." The threat should have hurt. Maybe a year ago it would have, but standing there in my own apartment, in my own life, I felt something I'd never felt before with my parents. I felt free. "Maybe it's time I stopped trying," I said softly. Lysandra stood up quickly. "Odelia, he didn't mean—" "Yes, he did." I looked at my father. And for once, we're both being honest about what this family really is. They left 10 minutes later. The tea sat cold on my coffee table. I stood at my window, watching their car pull away, and I realized I wasn't crying. I was angry. I was hurt. But I wasn't broken, because somewhere deep down I'd known this was coming. I'd known since I was 7 years old, watching Thyra's 4th birthday party from the kitchen window, that I would never be enough for them. And I was finally okay with that. 3 days later, I woke up to an email notification on my phone. From Samuel Brooks Law Office. Subject, temporary change. Executor notification. My heart started pounding before I even opened it. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, This is to inform you that Halvor Mitchell has been appointed as the official
My name is
executor
Renata
of Franklin
Martinez, and
Mitchell's
this is the story of
estate,
how I learned
per
that sometimes
family
the people who
consensus
gave you life
vote.
are the same
As
ones who try
executor,
to erase
Mr.
it.
Mitchell has filed a formal petition to review the distribution terms outlined in the will. The petition cites concerns regarding the testator's mental capacity at the time of the will's creation and requests a comprehensive evaluation of Franklin Mitchell's cognitive state during the amendment period 6 months prior to his death. A hearing has been scheduled for December 18th. Your attendance is required. Sincerely, Samuel Brooks, attorney at law. I read it 3 times. Then I threw my phone across the room. They were going to claim grandfather wasn't in his right mind. They were going to say he was confused, manipulated, incompetent. They were going to rewrite history to make him the victim and me the villain. And Halvor, who'd witnessed the signing of the will, who'd sat in that office and watched grandfather make these decisions with perfect clarity, was now the one trying to undo it all. I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking, not from fear, from rage. For a moment, just a moment, I let myself doubt. Was I being selfish? Was I really tearing the family apart over money? Would grandfather want me to fight this hard? I called Naomi, my friend from college. She answered on the second ring. Dee, what's wrong? I told her everything. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Odelia, she said finally, your grandfather wasn't confused. He saw exactly who you were and who they are. Don't let them gaslight you into giving up what's rightfully yours. This isn't about money. This is about them finally having to acknowledge that you matter. She was right. This wasn't about money. It was about 30 years of being told I didn't deserve the same love, the same attention, the same value as my sister. And I was done accepting that. The next day, I drove to Spokane to see Dorothy. The red brick house looked smaller than I remembered, but it still felt like the only place in my childhood where I'd ever been truly welcomed. Dorothy answered the door, pulled me into a tight hug, and said, I've been expecting you. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where grandfather and I used to do crossword puzzles together on Sunday mornings while everyone else was at church. Grandma, I started, did you know Dad was going to do this? She sighed deeply, stood up, and retrieved a thick folder from the cabinet above the refrigerator. I didn't know for certain, she said, setting it in front of me, but Franklin did. I opened the folder. Inside were printed emails dated from 8 years ago. From Halvor Mitchell to Franklin Mitchell. Subject, estate planning discussion. Dad, I've been thinking about your will. I know you want to be fair to all the grandkids, but I think we need to consider their individual circumstances. Odelia is independent. She's always been able to take care of herself. She doesn't need financial help. Frankly, she'd probably be uncomfortable accepting it. She's got her pride. You know how she is. But Thyra is different. She's sensitive. She needs security and support. She's not built for the kind of struggle Odelia seems to thrive on. I'm not saying cut Odelia out completely, but maybe a smaller portion? Something symbolic? An equal split wouldn't really be fair when you consider their different needs and capabilities. I hope you'll think about this. I'm only bringing it up because I want what's best for both girls. Halvor. My hands trembled as I read it. He'd tried this before, years ago, when I was still in college, still trying to prove myself, still hoping they'd eventually see me. The next email was grandfather's response. From Franklin Mitchell to Halvor Mitchell. Subject, estate planning discussion. Halvor, I understand your concerns, but I have to disagree with your assessment. Odelia is independent because no one gave her another choice. She takes care of herself because she learned early that no one else would. That's not a reason to give her less. It's a reason to give her more. Thyra has been given everything because you and Lysandra never let her try to stand on her own. You've created the very vulnerability you're now using as justification for favoritism. I have 3 grandchildren. I will not make any of them feel less valuable than the others. Odelia has worked for everything she has because she had to. Thyra has been given everything because you wanted to. Those are your choices, not theirs. This ends with me. The will stays as written. Equal shares, no exceptions. And Halvor, stop trying to convince me that giving less to one child is somehow fair. We both know better. Dad. I set down the email, tears streaming down my face. Not from sadness, from validation. Someone had seen it. Someone had understood. Dorothy put her hand over mine. Your grandfather knew exactly what he was doing, Odelia, and he knew your father would try this. That's why he added Clause 7. She pulled out another document, the original will amendment, with grandfather's handwritten notes in the margins. If Halvor contests this, he proves exactly why this clause was necessary. He spent 30 years teaching Odelia she doesn't deserve equal treatment. I won't let him do it from beyond the grave. Dorothy handed me a USB drive. This has everything. Audio recordings from the will amendment meeting, his medical records from that month showing perfect cognitive function, and his personal journal entries. Samuel Brooks has copies, but I want you to have them too. I took the drive, gripping it tightly. Why didn't you stop them before? I asked quietly. Why didn't you say something when I was growing up? Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. I tried, more than once. But Halvor, she took a shaky breath. My mother-in-law, my husband's mother, was cruel to him. Cold, critical, always compared him to his brother Thomas. When you were born and you looked like her, acted like her, strong and independent, it triggered something in him. He started seeing you as a reminder of his pain instead of as his daughter. So I was punished for reminding him of someone else, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. Yes, and I should have fought harder to protect you. I'm sorry I didn't. I sat there, holding the USB drive, feeling the weight of 30 years of invisible wounds finally being acknowledged. I'm going to fight this, I said, not for the money, for him, because he saw me when no one else did. Dorothy squeezed my hand. That's exactly what he hoped you'd do. The hearing was held in a cold, sterile conference room at Samuel Brooks's office. Everyone was there. Halvor and Lysandra sat on one side of the long table, their lawyer, a stern man named Richard Peterson, beside them. Thyra sat next to them, looking miserable. I sat on the other side with Samuel. Dorothy sat at the end of the table. Uncle Thomas, Halvor's older brother, and his son Garrett sat in chairs against the wall. An independent arbitrator, Ms. Ellen Rodriguez, presided over the meeting. Richard Peterson began with his opening statement, painting a picture of a confused old man, possibly suffering from early dementia, making rash decisions without proper consideration. Samuel countered with medical records, testimony from grandfather's doctor, and audio recordings from the will amendment meeting where Franklin Mitchell was articulate, sharp, and absolutely clear about his intentions. Then came the emails. Samuel projected them on the screen for everyone to see. Halvor's request, Franklin's refusal, the dates, the clarity, the deliberateness. Halvor's face went white. These emails show that Mr. Mitchell was not only mentally competent, but that he anticipated this exact challenge, Samuel said calmly. He added Clause 7 specifically to prevent what is happening in this room right now. Lysandra turned to Halvor, her voice sharp with panic. You told me this would work. You said we had a case. Enough, Halvor said through clenched teeth. Uncle Thomas stood up from his chair against the wall. Halvor, you witnessed that will. You signed it as a witness. You sat in that room and heard every word Dad said. How can you now claim he wasn't competent? Stay out of this, Thomas. No. Thomas's voice was firm. You signed that document. You validated it. And now you're trying to undo it because you don't like the outcome. That's not protecting your daughter. That's punishing the other one. The room fell silent. Ms. Rodriguez looked at Richard Peterson. Do you have any additional evidence to support your claim of diminished capacity? Richard shuffled his papers. We would need more time to gather. No, Ms. Rodriguez said. You don't, because there isn't any. Mr. Mitchell's medical records are pristine. His legal capacity is documented, and this email chain proves he was not only competent but prescient about this exact scenario. She turned to Halvor. Mr. Mitchell, under Clause 7 of your father's will, any individual who attempts to alter the distribution forfeits their role as executor. As of this moment, you are removed from that position. A neutral third-party attorney will be appointed to oversee the final distribution. Halvor stood up abruptly. This is This is over, Ms. Rodriguez said firmly. The will stands as written. Each grandchild receives their designated share. This hearing is concluded. As everyone started gathering their things, Thyra stood up. Her hands were shaking. Stop! Everyone turned to look at her. Just, everyone stop! Lysandra reached for her arm. Honey, let's go! Thyra jerked away. No, I need to say something. She looked at Halvor, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I don't want this. I never asked for this. Thyra, we're trying to protect you. By lying about Grandpa? Her voice broke. By trying to take money away from Odelia? How is that protecting me? You don't understand the situation. I understand that you've spent my whole life making me feel like I can't survive without you, like I'm too weak, too fragile, too incompetent to have my own money or make my own choices. Lysandra's face crumpled. We just wanted to take care of you. You wanted to control me. Thyra's voice was steady now, despite the tears. And I let you because it was easier than standing up for myself. But I'm done. She turned to me. We made eye contact for the first time since the meeting began. I'm sorry, Odelia, for everything, for not seeing how they treated you, for not saying anything when I should have, for being so wrapped up in their version of me that I never bothered to look at what they were doing to you. I didn't know what to say. My throat was tight. Grandpa's will was fair, Thyra continued, turning back to our parents. You just don't want to admit that you treated us differently for 30 years, that you gave me everything and gave her nothing, and now you're mad that someone finally gave her something you can't take away. Thyra. Halvor's voice had a warning edge. No, Dad. I'm done being the excuse for your guilt. I'm done being the favorite. Because being the favorite in this family means being the one who never got the chance to be strong. She grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. Before she left, she stopped next to me. Grandpa saw us both clearly, she said quietly. It took me 30 years to start seeing what he saw. Then she was gone. The room was silent. Halvor and Lysandra looked stunned. Uncle Thomas had tears in his eyes. Dorothy was gripping the arms of her chair, her face full of pain and pride. Ms. Rodriguez cleared her throat. The funds will be transferred within 2 weeks. This matter is closed. Samuel walked me to my car. The Seattle evening was cold, rain threatening in the dark clouds overhead. Are you all right? He asked. I took a deep breath. I don't know yet. Your grandfather would be proud of you. You fought for his wishes. That took courage. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I drove back to Seattle, my phone buzzed. A text from Thyra. Can we talk? Not now. But soon? I have a lot to figure out, but I want to try. I pulled over to the side of the highway, rain starting to spatter against the windshield. For 30 years, I'd been alone in this family, and now, maybe, I wasn't anymore. I texted back, yes, when you're ready. 2 weeks later, the transfer went through. $500,000 appeared in my bank account. I sat at my kitchen table, early summer sunlight streaming through the window, and I finally let myself believe it. I hadn't just kept grandfather's money. I'd kept his faith in me, his belief that I deserved to be treated equally, his final gift of validation, and that was worth more than any amount of money could ever be. The morning the money transferred into my account, I didn't feel joy. I felt numb. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the bank notification. The number was real, $500,000. Not a theoretical promise anymore, but actual money sitting in my account. I touched the screen like I could make it more tangible, like I could prove to myself that I'd actually kept something that belonged to me without having to surrender it for someone else's comfort. My phone buzzed. Dorothy, are you okay, sweetheart? I typed back. I think so. Still processing. Come for dinner this weekend. I'm making your grandfather's spaghetti. That made me cry. Not sobbing. Just quiet tears that surprised me by appearing at all. I'd spent so many years teaching myself not to cry that when it happened naturally, it felt foreign. That afternoon, I drove to Spokane. Dorothy opened the door and pulled me into a hug before I could say anything. She didn't ask questions. She just held me the way my mother never had, without conditions, without expectations, without needing me to be anything other than exactly who I was. We ate spaghetti at the kitchen table. She put on grandfather's jazz records, the ones he used to play on Sunday mornings while reading the newspaper, and for the first time in months, I ate without feeling like I had to hold myself together. After dinner, Dorothy took me upstairs to grandfather's office. It was exactly as he'd left it. Books on the shelves, papers on the desk, his reading glasses folded on top of a crossword puzzle he'd never finished. She opened a drawer and pulled out a wooden box. "He kept track of everything you did," she said softly. "You didn't see it, but he followed every step." Inside the box, my first article from the high school newspaper, my Clarkford scholarship letter, my graduation photo, a note in his handwriting, "Odelia Mitchell, proof that strength doesn't come from being favored. It comes from surviving despite the lack of it." I held that note for a long time, reading it over and over until the words blurred. "He didn't split the inheritance equally out of obligation," Dorothy said. "He did it because he believed you deserved a fresh start, without the weight of 30 years of injustice hanging over you." When I left that night, I didn't just feel like I'd kept money. I felt like I'd reclaimed something deeper, something that had been taken from me before I was old enough to defend it. My voice. The family's retaliation began quietly, then escalated. First, I was removed from the family Facebook group. No warning, no explanation, just gone. Then came the whispers. A former classmate of Thyra's messaged me on Instagram. "Hey, I heard you manipulated your grandpa when he was sick. That's really messed up. I thought you were better than that." I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. So that was the story they were telling, that I'd coerced a dying old man, that I'd taken advantage of someone vulnerable. I didn't respond. What was the point? The truth had been established legally. But in the court of family gossip, facts didn't matter as much as narrative. My cousin Emma unfollowed me. Uncle Robert's wife sent me a passive-aggressive text about family values and respecting elders. Aunt Patricia, who'd been kind to me my whole life, stopped answering my calls. Lysandra was spreading the story through her church circle, her book club, her yoga class. She'd turned me into the villain of a story where she and Halvor were the helpless victims trying to protect their vulnerable daughter from a greedy, manipulative older sister. The worst part wasn't the lies. It was how easily people believed them. Because when you've been invisible for 30 years, no one has enough information about you to defend you. They only know the version your parents created. And in that version, I'd always been cold, distant, difficult. It was easy to believe I'd be capable of manipulation. One evening, I got a text from Uncle Thomas, the one family member I'd thought might stay neutral. "Odelia, your Aunt Linda is heartbroken over this family conflict. Are you sure this is what your grandfather would have wanted? All this fighting and division?" I stared at that text for 20 minutes before deleting it without responding, because there was no point in explaining that I hadn't created the division. I'd just stopped pretending it didn't exist. I started avoiding all family events. I didn't go to Easter. I spent the 4th of July alone in my apartment, watching fireworks through the window. When Thanksgiving came around, I didn't even receive an invitation. The isolation was painful in a way I hadn't expected. Not because I missed those people, most of them had never really seen me anyway, but because it confirmed what I'd always suspected. I was only acceptable when I stayed small, stayed quiet, stayed in my assigned role. The moment I stood up for myself, I became expendable. I went back to therapy with Dr. Harper. Some nights I still woke up at 3 a.m., my chest tight, wondering if I'd made the right choice. Wondering if being right was worth losing every connection to my childhood, my family, my history. "You didn't lose them," Dr. Harper said during one session. "They lost you. There's a difference." It doesn't feel different. I know. But grief over losing something toxic is still grief. You're allowed to mourn what you wish they had been, even while accepting what they actually were. That helped. A little. 3 weeks after the hearing, Thyra called. It was late, after 10 p.m. I almost didn't answer. "Odelia?" Her voice was shaking. "Yeah? Can we talk? I mean, not like a big thing. I need to tell you something." "Okay." She took a shaky breath. Mom's been telling everyone you manipulated Grandpa, that you made constant demands, threatened to cut off contact with the family, convinced him to rewrite the will when he was too weak to think clearly. I closed my eyes. I know. I told her it wasn't true. I told her I was there at the hearing, I heard the evidence, I saw the emails, and she looked at me like I'd betrayed her. Thyra, she said if I keep defending you, she'll never forgive me. The silence stretched between us. Have you ever thought, I said carefully, that a family that only loves you when you stay quiet might not actually be love at all? Thyra was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, she whispered. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. What are you going to do? I don't know. They make me feel like I'm doing something wrong just because I started thinking differently, like questioning them is the same as betraying them. That's how control works, I said gently. They don't need chains when guilt does the job. Another pause. Will you help me? Thyra asked, her voice small. Figure this out? I don't expect you to fix anything, or I just don't want to do this alone. Something in my chest loosened. Not forgiveness exactly, but something softer than the anger I'd been carrying. Yeah, I said. I will. Over the next few months, I started making decisions about the money. Real decisions. Not reactive ones, but intentional choices about the life I wanted to build. First, I paid off my student loans, $45,000. Gone. When I clicked the final payment confirmation, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relief, deep, bone-tired relief, like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks and someone had finally let me set it down. Then I upgraded my apartment, not lavishly, just comfortably. I replaced the old sofa with a soft olive green chaise that actually supported my back. I installed larger windows that opened onto the balcony. I planted herbs in small pots, lavender, mint, basil, and every morning I'd make tea using Grandfather's old teapot while looking at the plants. It sounds simple, but it felt revolutionary. For the first time in my life, my home felt like a place designed for peace, not just survival. I put aside $20,000 for continued therapy. I invested $250,000 in index funds, boring, stable, the kind of long-term planning that made me feel secure. I kept $100,000 as an emergency fund, and I did something that surprised even me. I paid for Thyra's first semester of community college tuition. When I told her, she tried to refuse. Odelia, I can't accept that. After everything. This isn't Mom and Dad taking care of you, I interrupted. This isn't about control or obligation or keeping you dependent. This is me choosing to support someone who stood up for herself. That's different. She was quiet for a moment. Then, thank you. You're welcome. It felt good. Not because I was being generous, but because I was making a choice, my choice, about how to use resources that finally belonged to me. But I want to be honest. It wasn't all healing and growth. Some days I still woke up feeling guilty. Some days I wondered if I was being selfish, if I'd destroyed my family over money, if Grandfather would actually be proud or disappointed by the fallout. Dr. Harper called it survivor's guilt. You survived a toxic system, she explained, and now you're carrying guilt for escaping when others are still trapped in it. That's normal, but it's not true. What do I do with it? You let it exist. You don't fight it or try to logic it away. You just acknowledge it and keep moving forward anyway. So that's what I did. 4 months after the hearing, Thyra asked to meet for coffee. We chose a neutral place, a small cafe near Portland State University, halfway between Seattle and our parents' house. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup. She wore jeans and a PSU sweatshirt, and she looked tired, but also more alive than I'd ever seen her. I enrolled at community college, she said after we ordered. Social work major. I blinked. Social work? She nodded, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. I want to help people who've been hurt by their families. People like you. She paused. People like me. Thyra, I knows what you're going to say. That I don't have experience, that I don't understand, that I was the favorite. That's not what I was going to say. She looked up at me, surprise written across her face. I was going to say, I think that's brave. Her eyes filled with tears. Really? Really. We sat in silence for a moment, the cafe noise humming around us. Mom and Dad asked me to do something, Thyra said quietly. A couple weeks after the hearing, they wanted me to sign papers to temporarily transfer my inheritance into Mom's account. They said it was for tax purposes, that they'd help me manage it better than I could on my own. My chest tightened. What did you do? I said no. She looked at me. And Mom told me I was no longer her daughter. Jesus, Thyra. She said I'd been poisoned by you, that I'd turned into someone she didn't recognize, that I was choosing money over family. I'm sorry. Don't be. Thyra's voice was firm, because she was right about one thing. I have turned into someone she doesn't recognize, but that's because I'm finally becoming myself instead of the version of me she needed. I reached across the table and took her hand. I was jealous of you my whole life, Thyra said, tears streaming down her face now. Not because you didn't get attention, because you could make your own choices. I didn't know how to do anything without their approval. Everything I did because they told me to. I thought that was love, but it was just control dressed up as protection. You didn't know, I said gently. Neither of us did. We were kids. But you figured it out. You left. You built a whole life for yourself. And I just stayed. You're leaving now? She looked at me, really looked at me. Yeah, I guess I am. Before we left the cafe, Thyra told me something that finally made everything make sense. Mom told me something once, she said. I was 16. She said, your father's mother made him feel worthless his whole life, always comparing him to his brother, always criticizing, never satisfied. We won't let that happen to you. But they did it to me instead, I said quietly. Yeah, Thyra's voice broke. They protected me from the pain Grandma Dorothy caused Dad by inflicting it on you, and I never even saw it happening. 6 months after the inheritance settled, I received a letter. Actual handwritten letter, postmarked from Portland. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Lysandra. I held the envelope for 3 days before opening it. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Part of me was terrified of what it might say. Part of me desperately needed to read it. Finally, on a rainy Seattle evening, I sat at my kitchen table and opened it. Odelia, I don't know if you'll read this. Part of me hopes you won't. Because if you do, I'll have to face the fact that I'm admitting something I've spent 30 years denying. Your father and I have had a lot of time to think since the hearing. Or maybe I've had time to think and he's still angry. I don't know anymore. We don't talk the way we used to. When you were born, I watched your father's mother treat him like he was never good enough, never smart enough, never successful enough, always second to Thomas. It broke something in him that I don't think ever healed. I promised myself I would never do that to my children. I would never create that kind of wound. But I did. I just inflicted it on a different child. I told myself Thyra needed more because she was softer, more vulnerable, more fragile. And you were so strong, so capable, so independent. I thought you'd be fine. I thought strength meant you didn't need support. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid you'd grow up cold like your father's mother. Afraid you'd be hard to reach, difficult to love. Afraid you wouldn't need me. So I chose Thyra, every single day, in 1,000 small ways. I chose her over you. I see now what I couldn't see then. You weren't naturally independent. We made you that way. We gave you no choice but to be strong because we refused to be there when you needed us. Your father sees you as a reminder of his mother. He always has. And instead of protecting you from his unresolved pain, I let him project it onto you. I was complicit in your loneliness. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. I'm not even asking you to respond to this letter. I just need you to know. It was never about you not being enough. It was about me being too afraid to see you clearly. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe it's too late. Maybe some damage can't be repaired. But if you ever want to talk, really talk, not just perform the script of mother and daughter, I'm here. I'm sorry, Odelia. I'm so deeply sorry. Mom. I read the letter 3 times. The first time, I felt anger, rage that it took this long, that it required a legal battle and family destruction for her to finally see what she'd done. The second time, I felt grief, for the mother I'd needed and never had, for the relationship that could have been if she'd been brave enough to face her fears 30 years earlier. The third time, I felt nothing, or maybe not nothing, maybe acceptance. This was who she was. This was all she was capable of giving, and that wasn't my fault. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't respond either. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have that conversation, but not today. 1 year later. It's been a year since the inheritance was settled. I'm sitting on my balcony in Seattle, watching clouds move across the skyline. It's Saturday morning, and Thyra is visiting for our weekly coffee ritual. She's in her second year at Portland State now. She transferred from community college last semester. She's studying social work and psychology, and she's thriving in a way I've never seen before. Mom asked me again if you'd come to Thanksgiving, Thyra says, sitting in the chair next to mine. What did you say? I said you'll decide when you're ready, and maybe you'll never be, and that's okay. I look at her, surprised. A year ago, that answer would have been impossible for her. Thank you. She shrugs. I'm just telling the truth. You don't owe them access to you just because they're family. Family has to be earned. We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking our coffee,
Before we dive in, I
watching
want to know where
the
you're
city
watching
wake
from.
up below
Have you
us.
ever had to fight for your
Have you
place?
thought about what you're going to do with the rest of the money? Thyra asks. I nod. I'm enrolling in a low residency counseling certification program. 2 evenings a week. Really? Yeah. I've been volunteering at a support center for adults from dysfunctional families. It's small, just weekend sessions. But I want to do more. I want to be the person for others that I never had. Thyra smiles. Grandpa would be proud. I think so too. Later, we walk around Green Lake together. Thyra tells me about her internship at a teen center, about a girl she's working with who reminds her of herself, desperate for approval, unable to see her own worth. I told her something you told me, Thyra says, that a family that only loves you when you stay quiet isn't really love. What did she say? She cried. Then she said, No one's ever said that to me before. I understand that feeling completely. I haven't spoken to Halver in over a year. Lysandra texts occasionally, surface-level things about the weather, about a recipe she thinks I'd like. I respond sometimes. Brief, polite, distant. It's not forgiveness. It's not reconciliation. It's just acknowledgement that we exist in the same world, even if we no longer share the same space. Is it healed? No. Is it healing? Maybe. Is it enough? For now. That evening, after Thyra leaves, I sit at my desk and open my laptop. I've been writing down my story, not for publication, but for processing, for remembering, for making sense of 30 years of feeling like I was invisible. I read the last paragraph I wrote. People ask if I regret fighting for the inheritance, if it was worth losing my family over money. But I didn't lose my family. I lost people who only loved a version of me that never actually existed, people who needed me to stay small so they could feel big. And I found my sister, the real version of her, not the one our parents created. I found my grandmother Dorothy. I found myself. Grandfather didn't just leave me money, he left me permission. Permission to stop shrinking, permission to take up space, permission to walk away from people who couldn't see me without feeling guilty about it. The old cycle, the one of favoritism, conditional love, and emotional neglect, ended with him. And this new chapter, the one where I get to define my own worth, build my own family, choose my own path, I'm still writing it. I close the laptop and walk to the window. The Seattle skyline is lit up now, city lights reflecting off the lake. I think about 7-year-old me, standing in front of a grocery store cake with 7 candles, wishing to feel special. I think about 17-year-old me, holding a scholarship letter in an empty house, realizing I'd never be enough. I think about 30-year-old me, sitting in a lawyer's office, finally receiving proof that someone had seen me all along. And I realize I don't need them to see me anymore. I see myself, and that's enough.